And last year in May, I think it was May 31st in this very room, the founder of 3D Coaching, the guy who wrote the curriculum and really got it all started, Jeff Duke, came here and had a presentation about really more his story, kind of how he got involved in coaching and the journey that he went on and how he arrived at the point of developing 3D. It was a great presentation, and because of the embrace of that event, we wanted to follow up with this one. And the purpose here today would be to dive in a little bit deeper. Last time, the presentation was more about Jeff's story and how he got involved in coaching. This year, it's going to be a little bit different, and we're going to start out in a little bit. I'll introduce our speaker, and we're going to split things up into two time periods today, two presentations. We'll have one before lunch that really goes into a little bit of the what and the why behind this coaching model and this leadership model in the workplace. And then we'll break, send everybody through the buffet line as quickly as we can, and then we'll sit at our tables, and we've attempted to assign table leaders at each table that could lead us through some discussion questions that kind of play off of what the presenter will bring us here in just a little bit. And then Dan will come back after lunch and kind of wrap things up with a little bit more of the how, more of the practical. Hey, how do we do this? How do we do this in where we're at right now in the places where we find ourselves at work? So that's what lies ahead. And again, thank you for coming. And with that, I'd just like to introduce Dan LeMoine, who's come. Dan I've known for some time now. Dan is a young man that I have a great amount of respect and love for. Dan is one of these young people who has an educational background that he could use to do just about anything. And he could get out and he could make a lot of money if he wanted to. And Dan and others have chosen to serve presently down in the Dominican Republic at Doulos Discovery School. It's a wonderful place for Dominican kids to receive probably the best education they ever could. And Dan serves there with his wife. And our son Kurt is here today. Good to have Kurt. Kurt also served down there. And so Dan, I think, is uniquely gifted, and the Lord has really been kind of calling him, I think, in this area of a application in the workplace of faith and of impact. He has written extensively about this and has a real passion for this. So just join me in welcoming Dan LeMoine.
Thank you. Man, super honored to be with you guys today. As Glenn mentioned, this is some stuff that I've been going really deep on the last couple of years, and I'll get into some of my story in a little bit. But really, just wrestling with this question of how do we make our workplaces more transformative and a little bit less transactional? And so FCA's got a soft spot in my heart. I'm going with Coach Narducci, high school football, going to FCA before games, and a similar organization called Athletes in Action was really formative in my faith journey in college, being a part of that. And so, as Glenn mentioned, I wanted to spend this time before lunch just talking a little bit about the what and the why kind of behind this idea of three-dimensional coaching, and drawing some connections on what that looks like from a leadership perspective. Because I feel like when I discovered this three-dimensional coaching, I was like, this is it. This provides an amazing framework that we can apply to our organizations and in our teams and how we lead just beyond the field. And so super honored to be with you guys. Wanted to start quickly and just talk about a little bit about what's at stake, though. So who here's been on a rowboat or been boating? It's the Pacific Northwest, right? You guys have probably all been. See some camo out there. I'm sure there's some folks. But imagine you're in a rowboat. It's a big rowboat. There's 10 folks trying to get to some destination. And you've got 3 of those folks who are actively engaged. They're rowing. They're working hard trying to get that boat to where it needs to go. You got 5 folks in that boat who are disengaged. They are gonna row. If you ask them to row, they're gonna row. If you're watching them and kind of lording over them, if you look away, they're on their phone. They're splashing in the water. They're checking Facebook. They're disengaged. And then you got two folks who are in the back of the boat drilling holes in the bottom of the boat, causing you to take on water and really undermining your direction. As coaches, with only 30% of our crew getting us towards where we need to go, we all know that, hey, if this is the state of our team, we need to do something. We need to do something to engage the 5 that are disengaged, and maybe even get rid of the 2 who are undermining our culture, right? And my question is, are we looking at our organizations with that same idea? Like, are we seeing that as clearly in our organizations? Because unfortunately, this is exactly what's happening in our organizations today. Gallup, a couple years ago, published a survey or a study, and those are the findings. That you got 3 out of every 10. You got 30% of your folks who are engaged in your mission. They're engaged in working hard and trying to win for you and your organization. You got 5 folks who are disengaged. They're checking Facebook. They're splashing their oars in the water. They're not really doing anything, but if you micromanage them, they'll probably comply. And then you've got 2 people who are undermining your mission. And so I think with only 70% of your employees disengaged, we got big problems. And I think this three-dimensional framework really provides a wonderful opportunity for us to engage those folks and really win. And again, this is what's happening on average. But FCA is an average. You wouldn't be here if you were content with average results. And I think as Christians, we're not called to be average, we're called to be excellent. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into what this can look like for us. Because if we fail to engage our employees, we'll continue to lose top talent, produce mediocre results. Our workplaces will never go from merely transactional, micromanaging type situations to a place where people are actually living into their best selves. Unfortunately, that Gallup survey doesn't give us a framework for that, and so that's where I get really pumped about what we're going to get into here. And I think it's my belief that if we take the 3 dimensions of coaching to the body, the mind, and the spirit, and we apply that into the 3-dimensional leadership, we're going to win. And I hope that at the end of today we see that these biblical principles win. It's not just that they produce results, that we will engage our employees, we will engage our teams in a meaningful way, and they work in the world. This isn't just a woo-woo, everybody will feel good. Like, these actually work. Biblical principles work, and it allows us to really impact lives. In the same way that we know that sports creates this wonderful context to impact kids' lives, I think work has that exact same. We have that exact same opportunity in front of us on our teams, at work, and in our organizations. And so I wanted to get into a little bit, now that we've talked about what's at stake, is just what is 3-dimensional coaching. I'm sure most of us are familiar, especially if you heard Jeff talk last year. But when I think back to some of the coaches in my life, from Mr. Patterson and Pee Wee soccer to some of my positional coaches, Mr. Harrington in high school football, and my college rugby coach, Jared Moore, there's a common denominator. There's certain characteristics that they all shared that have marked me for the better. And I feel like I'm seeing that as true in my professional career as well. And so this first dimension of 3-dimensional coaching is this idea of fundamentals. How do we coach the body? And I think we all understand this just kind of intuitively. Like, if you're not bigger, faster, stronger, if you can't perform on the field physically, it's going to be hard to win. Even if you've got the heart and if you've got the confidence and the motivation, if you don't have that kind of base level foundation of the fundamentals, it's going to be tough to win. And so that's the first dimension. And so in sports, that looks like, what are your play assignments? You know, getting in the gym, getting bigger, faster, stronger, those type of things. In the organization, we see things like training, employee training, and systems and procedures. And are your employees well trained? It's really hard if I hop in that rowboat and I've never seen an oar in my life if you tell me to row and I've never rowed before, it's really hard for me to perform, right? And so are we taking care to make sure that our employees are trained well? And I think most organizations, if you're competitive in the marketplace, they've got some form of this. I think there is sometimes we need to audit ourselves and go back and say, hey, we need to shore up some things there. But that's kind of your first dimension. Think of that as like the base level of our pyramid, this three-dimensional pyramid. You then have got the mind. So you've got your fundamentals, which is the body, coaching to the body. The second is the mind, the psychology. That looks like in sports, are your players confident? Are they motivated? Are the team dynamics and team cohesion, do those exist? I have a friend, David Franco. He is the mental coach for the Seattle Mariners. I didn't even know that baseball teams had mental coaches, but that's how important this second dimension is he is responsible for every AAA player all the way down to the Dominican League, about 250 players, to just make sure that every time they take the field, every time they step into the batter box, they just have a bulletproof mindset, that they're going through the same mental routines, and especially in a game like baseball, there's a lot of downtime, there's a lot of time to let doubts and things creep in, and so he's tasked with making sure that these guys are unflappable. And so for us in our organizations, I think that looks a lot like, do our employees know that we back them? Do we have an atmosphere of recognition? Is there an atmosphere of safety? Is there an atmosphere of feedback? Feedback, not that it's going to be this punishment, scary thing, but an atmosphere that, hey, these are opportunities for growth, right? So that's what it can kind of look like in our organizations, just that our employees are confident and motivated, and there's team cohesiveness and good team dynamics. And we'll get into some of the how here after lunch, as I mentioned. So that's your second dimension. And then the third dimension in this three-dimensional framework is this idea of heart. And so I think we all kind of know that intuitively. We've maybe been a part of teams or coached teams where it's like, yes, man, there's just like this spark. There's an energy about this team. It's almost like they have extra players out there, right? And I think for me, the best teams that I've played on have helped me really understand, like, where does my identity and my value and my worth lie? And it wasn't in the sport, and that's the paradoxical thing. As much as bought in as we were, it was, I can do other things well because we're doing this well. And my best coaches that I've ever had have used that as a platform for me to point me towards Jesus, and or to my truest self, of like, you've got what it takes. I think we all walk around in some form, and this plays out differently for all of us, of wondering, like, do I have what it takes? Am I enough? Right? And I think sports and or organizations in our work where we spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day have that opportunity to do that as well. And I think we can engage our employees if we're kind of getting to this third dimension. We can engage them in a way because they're feeling like they're growing and they're getting more than what they're pouring in. And I think this, from what I've seen and what I've been pushing into, is this question that, like, transformational leadership really boils down into this choosing this paradigm of seeing our employees, seeing them as full humans, right? Mind, body, spirit, the whole package. It's not just lording over them to get them to do a task. It's seeing them and saying, I see you as capable, and I see you as worthy of pouring into, right? And I care about you beyond what you can produce, right? In the same way that in sports we can say, hey, Pee-wee baseball, Pee-wee football, Pee-wee soccer, we say, like, hey, it's not about what you're producing on the field, right? We want to win, and here's what we have to do to get there, but we care about you beyond what you can produce, right? And this isn't easy. That's one of the things that I think that I've been learning, because I don't do it well all the time, is that this relational work is really, really hard. It's not easy. But what good thing comes easy, right? It's messy. And I think that's because each one of us and each one of our employees brings to the table a whole life of experiences and insecurities and anxieties and fears and joys and tastes to the table, right? And so it's really hard. There's no cookie cutter formula or magic potion or hey, do this with every single employee the same way and it's going to work the same way. No, we're all unique. God's created us all as unique beings. And so really focusing on how do we reverse engineer what motivates one employee that might not motivate another employee. So it takes seeing them, as I mentioned, and spending time with them and getting to know them and really trying to understand them best. And I think because each person is unique and brings to the table those things, we have this massive opportunity to meet people where they're at. In the same way that I see certain ministries doing that, whether that's FCA or Young Life or Athletes in Action, is like meeting kids where they're at. And I think we have, as leaders, have a responsibility to do that as well within our organizations. And so I wanted to spend a quick moment kind of just sharing with you about my story. So about 5 years ago, I left the business world pretty jaded. I was questioning whether God had a place for business. I was questioning whether God had a purpose for business. I had moved back, I graduated college in 2009, and had moved back from Scotland. I moved there to, my goal had always been to play rugby at the highest levels I possibly could. And so that took me to Edinburgh, Scotland, where I was pursuing playing for a professional team. And I moved back to Ohio after that pipe dream fizzled and the reality of student loans hit in. And I moved to Akron, Ohio, and I was working for a workout and turnaround firm in Akron, Ohio. So we were working with distressed middle market companies in the Midwest. And as you can imagine, post-recession 2010, there was no lack of distressed companies to call clients. And my hours were good. I was getting paid quite a bit for a 24-year-old, 25-year-old guy. I was in the room with a lot of C-level, chief-level folks where the deals were being done, and it was really cool to get to see what made certain companies tick and what made certain companies fail. But something was missing. I saw a lot of folks who were really, really unfulfilled, and I saw that it seemed like their only focus was to accumulate. And I'm not against making money. I think I'm probably a capitalist. Curtis and I go back and forth on this quite a bit, but I'm a capitalist at heart. But I think if our purpose starts and ends with how much money we can put in our bank accounts, we've missed the mark, especially if that means that we just treat people like units of production and we never get beyond this first dimension. Or if we treat clients as just, you're a bundle of emotions that I have to figure out how to manipulate to get you to buy my widget or to come and be our client, right? And I just sense like there has to be more than that. There has to be. Like there's this whole sphere of culture, and I can't believe that God would just forget about this, but it seemed like that to me. So I was really wrestling with this. Fortunately, I've come full circle on that, and I think in part, or in a large part, due to connecting with a lot of folks like yourselves, who are really pushing into this question and this struggle. Like, I think we're all trying to live out this hypothesis of how do we move the needle of our organizations in a meaningful way and produce results, but make our workplace a transformative one, and really live out this call to make disciples and to help people flourish, right? And so that was kind of my story, and I'm confident that this community together, we can find ways to do business and to do our organizations and to lead in a way that honors God and focus beyond just what we're doing, whether that's coaching or leading our organizations or being a leader within our team, but really how do we honor God in the way that we do it and how we do it. And so that's some of the what's. So those are the kind of the three dimensions: this body, mind, spirit, what it kind of looks like in the coaching world, what it can look like maybe in the organizational sense. I wanted to take a quick time to just talk about some of the whys. And I think I mentioned the what's at stake, but I think beyond this why of, hey, we want to engage our employees. If we have 70% of our workforce who are disengaged or currently trying to undermine our cultures, that's a no-brainer. We got to figure out a way to engage our employees, engage our teams. But beyond that, I think there's two kind of big whys that really resonate with me as I think about what is my role within the influence that I've been given within my organization. And the first one is just that we're called to love others. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like God says, love God, or Jesus says, love God, love others. And I think that's because we're made in the image of God, right? Where each one of us and each one of our employees that we lead is made with dignity and value. And I think sometimes we use this idea of loving others as a cop-out. Because it's not just loving people and stopping there. It's not just loving people and being nice all the time. A lot of times it means holding them to high standards. That's the best way to love them. Or having hard conversations. And really choosing to say, hey, I know you can do better, right? And that's hard, because I know for me, one of my idols is fear of man. Like, I want to be seen as credible and well-liked and popular, and it's hard when I have to sit down with somebody on my team and say, hey, I think we can do better, because I know that conversation I'm not gonna walk away feeling all fuzzy inside, like rainbows and unicorns. Like, emotions are gonna fly, right? But I don't think we can be afraid of having those high expectations. I remember there was a practice my freshman year of college. We were having a scrimmage, and I had won a starting spot on the first squad, and we were scrimmaging our second team. And on the second team was like the guy who never left the college town. So he was like 29, 30, and he was just a beast. He was an excellent rugby player, and he was on the other team that we were scrimmaging. And he broke the line, and I was taking a pursuit angle, and I went soft, and I missed this tackle. And we were jogging back to get ready for the kickoff. And this super senior on the team, he was a fifth-year senior who was also a stud. He was on my team during this scrimmage. He knew that I thought he was like the cat's pajamas. Like, this guy was the coolest guy. He looked like a movie star. Like, he had the cutest girlfriend. Like, he was just so cool, and he liked us. So like, we were always hanging out at his place and coming over from the dorm. His name was John Coughlin. And John looked at me, he's like, come on, LeMoine, like, you don't miss tackles. I know you can do better than that. And at first I kind of bristled, and I feel like that was a big risk that he took. Like, he jeopardizes this popular spot in my life of me thinking that he was the coolest guy ever, but he thought enough of me to call me to my higher self. And he thought enough of our collective good as a team to be the best team that we could be, to call me out a little bit. And he didn't do it in front of everybody. We were just jogging back side by side, and he called me out. And I think there was something in that taking that risk to really love me, and I don't think he was like, I'm gonna love Dan. You know, that wasn't the rugby culture at Miami University. But there was something in that where he thought of me enough to call me to my highest, my truest self, I think, as a player. So that's kind of the first why, just that we're made in the image of God, and that loving people doesn't always mean being nice. Or doing the easy nice thing. I think the second big why is this idea of purpose. Some friends of mine, they've got a web branding agency called Ipso Creative, and it's been really formative in me, kind of shaping some of my philosophies around this idea of three-dimensional leadership. And they say they don't have a mission statement on their website. It's not a Christ-centered mission, but their purpose statement, which is what they have on their website, and that they really buy into, is that the purpose of business is not to maximize shareholder value. The purpose of business is to help humans flourish. And I just think there's something really cool about that, because while they hire non-Christians and they are not all Christians, they've all bought into that, which is really special. And I think it goes down when I talk to their partner and their founder. It goes back to this creation mandate that we see in Genesis 1, where God, has created Adam and Eve, and he says, hey, go fill the earth and subdue it. Now, I'm no pastor. I don't play one on the TV. But to me, that says the world is chaotic. Go create. Go build organizations. Go manage banks. Go engineer computers. Compose music. Do what we all naturally, innately do once we're out of high school, is work, right? And so we each have been called to this. There's this mandate, this first commandment. I always trick my kids in my entrepreneurship class. I go, guys, what's the first commandment? They're like, oh, love the Lord your God. I'm like, no. It's go create. Go fill and subdue the earth. Like, we all have been called to work. And I don't think God would call us that if it weren't for this opportunity for us to flourish and to live into our truest versions of ourselves. And I think that's where this holistic, three-dimensional leadership really comes into play. Is like this context of work is massive, and I think we can all agree on that. I don't think you guys would be here if you didn't have that sense as well. And And as I mentioned before, this stuff is messy, messy, messy. I have a mentor, his name's Zach Clark, and he says, mistakes are opportunities to build relationship. And I love that. I love that. I think we cannot be afraid to back ourselves and push into this, because I think this doesn't always look super clean cut in our organizations, and it might feel like I'm taking a huge risk in trying to love my employees well and to engage with them on not just the body and the mind, but at the heart level as well. And I think we need to back ourselves and trust that God is going to meet us in our attempts to authentically lead, right? So in a moment, we're gonna break for lunch, and I hope that our discussions can be about, like, when in our lives have we seen this three-dimensional leadership or coaching work well, whether that's for us as players, maybe back in the day, or maybe where we've seen other coaches, or maybe where we've done it well. And there's our table leaders have got some questions and some discussion questions that I hope that we can really push into. But I think there's value in working through some of this together and hearing what's worked and what hasn't in our respective organizations, and maybe spark some ideas on how we can do this better and continue to kind of push into this question of how do we lead in a transformative way and make our workplaces